Conversations from the front lines of the talent supply chain. This is Hireside Chats. Join us as we delve into the world of talent acquisition and explore the latest trends, challenges, opportunities, strategies, and insights from the best in the business. Get inspired by industry pioneers and seasoned veterans and discover the secrets to building powerful talent functions from their experiences. Whether you're a CEO, a seasoned HR professional, a growing business looking to scale, or someone just starting in the field, there's something for everyone. Ready for the ultimate recruitment power-up? Let's go.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Hireside Chats, your go-to podcast for the latest news, views, and insights from the dynamic landscape of the talent supply chain areas. I'm your host, Sajay, and today we are exploring a cutting-edge topic: the interplay of cognitive brain science and modern talent management. Cognitive brain science, the study of the brain and the nervous system, offers invaluable insights into how people learn, process information, and make better decisions. From understanding how people learn to fostering motivation and engagement, cognitive brain science holds the key to unlocking the full potential of your workforce. Join us as we navigate the neural pathways of motivation, shaping the trajectory of employee success and organizational growth. To talk to us about this fascinating topic, we have Srinivas Ananthanarayanan, founder and chief scientist, employee behavior and performance, founder of Peopleverse, a path-breaking cognitive science-powered venture, revolutionizing the potential of people and businesses. With over 23 years of experience, Srinivas has led large teams and established greenfield businesses across the global geographies. He holds expertise in organizational transformation, people strategy, and has collaborated with leading minds from academia and premier technical universities globally. He has advanced certifications in business leadership and psychological aid provision from esteemed institutions like Singapore Management University and the Johns Hopkins University in the USA. Hello, Srinivas, and welcome to our podcast. And thank you very much for sparing this time.
Very good morning, Satish, and it's great to be here. And thanks for inviting me to your Hireside Chats.
So before we begin, Srini, we're just curious to hear about the journey that led to the creation of your cognitive science-powered venture and how you believe it's shaping the landscape of people and businesses today. If you can tell us a little more about the origin of Peopleverse and the story behind it and what you do, I think our listeners will be intrigued.
Thank you, Satish. Definitely, yes. Peopleverse has been one of my dreams for the last 15 years, and it came to fruition in 2022. It came back as one of my recall in terms of how I wanted to kind of traverse my journey, contributing more to the country, contributing more to the society in large. One of the key, I would call as an outcome-driven purpose, was many of these situations, many of the challenges that we face as an organization are most of the times repetitive when it comes to employee issues. And I was on a journey to find insights that would kind of permanently remedy the situations or at least mitigate employee-related problems that are challenging the business sphere. Having said that, Peopleverse came into the right time, right during the COVID period, and this had kind of struck the right chord among the organizations in India. For example, I saw a huge gap that exists between the research world, where a lot of things are getting studied, a lot of research is getting done with the advanced imagery that we have been gifted with, especially fMRI and various invasive or non-invasive procedures onto the brain. So, in fact, I had the opportunity to even apply many of these concepts when I was heading HR for some of my previous employers, and that led to give me confidence that we could kind of propagate this particular concept across the world. And I started work from India.
Brilliant. So now that we are in the annual performance appraisal cycle, Srini, we've been through that for decades now. At the center of this process lies, I believe, the intrinsic motivation of employees. And that in turn serves as the driving force behind an organization's success. Now, we all know that motivated employees are the backbone of any thriving workplace. And if they bring their passion, dedication, and a sense of purpose to their roles and to their work, it is guaranteed that organizational success is more or less confirmed. But in your mind, what exactly motivates people, and what do you think are the key factors that ignite motivation in individuals? I'm sure you have done a lot of research on this in the space.
That's a fantastic question. In fact, that's a very interesting question. I'm sure many of your listeners would appreciate this, given that you've hit the right chord. Many of them are either kind of basking their success probably after a promotion, or they're kind of heartbroken if they didn't get received one in terms of their merit or salary increases. So motivation is a very, very strong subject when it comes to the brain reward system. In fact, I would kind of narrate it with a story so that your listeners could kind of understand what is the kind of concept behind motivation, Satish. When we do our transformation programs with startups, scale-ups to multinational, large conglomerates, many of the times the industry talk about, when it comes to change or when it comes to inspiration, it has to be either top down or bottom up. But where cognitive brain science truly differentiates the approaches, it has to start from within. Okay, as you rightly said, it has to be purpose driven. But when you look at and scan of a brain, you're not going to find words, you're not going to find pictures, you're not going to find anything that we're talking or writing about. For example, organizations spend a lot of time and effort on reinforcing their vision, mission, core values. But it could be through external parameters, through placards, through billboards, or through booklets. But what actually motivates an employee is a very complex system of brain. Okay, and that's what actually intrigued me into this field as well. When you look at the motivational reward system, there are. I'm not going to get into too much of concepts. I don't want to complicate with jargons, but let me make it simple for your listeners so that they could listen and apply at their workplace. So when it comes to motivation, we are kind of looking at two interesting systems that work in our brain. One is stimulating reward centered neural paths, or stimulating pain related neural paths. Okay, so for example, when you have an environment where employees are feeling very, very stressed, what actually happens within the brain is like this. There is something called a prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex is a brain that sits behind your forehead. Okay, example, when you're tensed or when you're kind of lacking motivation, what happens is, like how you kind of clench your fist, the same thing happens in your brain. The prefrontal cortex kind of narrows and reduces the path of glucose and oxygen that gets circulated within your brain. So what happens is, when an employee is feeling stressed, or when an employee is not at their optimal level, the HR or the people manager should understand that the reward mechanism is kind of being underplayed. Why? Is because there is something in the environment which is causing the threat atmosphere in the brain. So brain can only read two things: whether I'm in a perceived threat or I'm in a situation which is going to reward me. So these are the only two parameters brain can understand, to kind of put it in a very, very simple way. Number two, when it comes to the reward system, if I'm going to talk a little bit about science, how brain computes rewards. So there are two major things that sit inside all the human brains. One is called the ventral tegmental area and nucleus accumbens. It's called NAcc. What it means is, all of us at this point of know about this neurotransmitter called dopamine, because many of the Instagrammers or many of these social media influencers talk about it. But these two things, the VTA and NAC, is the exact place where dopamine gets secreted and it gets absorbed. So when I say secreted, it's a neurotransmitter. Okay, so what it means when it comes to motivating an employee is, this particular dopamine reward system has to be functional. It could be through external rewards like salary, like incentives, or like any other programs, or a good office workspace, or a good manager. or it could be someone who is intrinsically driven with a purpose and passion.
Brilliant. So you mentioned about NAcc as one of the key regions associated with reward and pleasure of, or the surprise factor that you mentioned. That's an interesting takeaway. Can you just elaborate its role? Now, a knowledge of this, along with the knowledge of cognitive brain science principles, how do you think organizations can use this to define or lay out their motivational strategies?
Fantastic question, Satish. Not everyone would understand or appreciate cognitive brain science because sometimes it's used medically, to understand any kind of underlying issues related to a person. But let me kind of slightly walk 2 steps backward to kind of explain to your listeners as to what I'm trying to tell you. There's something called sympathetic nervous system. Okay, sympathetic nervous system is a mechanism that nature has given to us to protect us from predators. Okay, it could be a predator like a lion, tiger, or it could be a predator like a manager or a bad boss or your peer who is very competing with you, or it could be a competition in the market. Now, what is happening in the industry, as per our study, as per our own understanding of how Indian workspace is functioning, there are 3 zones when it comes to sympathetic nervous system, the green, orange, and the red. What we find predominantly happening in the industry is when you work, you are at the orange zone. That means your brain is constantly getting the input of a threat. Okay, it could be a project deadline. It could be, you're kind of getting delayed for a meeting, as simple as a trigger, which your 5 senses picks up. Or it could be even a smell if you're working in a factory. Okay, as simple as that. Now, what we're trying to tell you from this is when we have your brain constantly trying to scan around you for a threat, okay, the reward mechanism goes to the backseat. Okay, the first and primemost thing that for a dopamine neurotransmitter to get activated and be in the NAcc and VT area is the body and the brain has to sense that this is a very safe environment for me. That's the primary number 1 reason. For example, innovation does not happen when your brain perceives threat, or a creative idea does not come when your brain perceives threat. Your prefrontal cortex, in some countries they call it as neocortex. This is very, very important. If you are under a threat perception, this does not work. So if this does not work, naturally the organizations will not see an employee to be reward worthy. Now, coming back to the subject of what we are trying to address, dopamine is a reward. It reinforces reward-related memories. And your question is very, very to the point. Because today, many of the organizations look for policy standard practices. What happens in the brain is your brain has already understood that these rewards are already for me. Okay, so the dopamine is not going to get activated by the regular rewards that you already in play, because you either give them at the offer letter or during the incentive rollout that this is what you're going to get. Okay, so when the dopamine neurotransmitter is really active and it gets dropped into this 2 zones, when it is seeing a surprise, it is not the reward itself, Satish, which actually makes the dopamine neurotransmitter to kick in, but the expectation of a reward that most powerfully influences the reaction. It's not only the neurotransmitter, it also transcends to your emotional reaction of being happy, being joyful after you get the reward. Now, one of the important things when it comes to the actual reward is if anything that can be predicted. Okay, I just want you to be very careful here. For example, if your brain can predict the reward and if the reality is greater than what you have predicted, then the dopamine secretion will be very, very high. Okay, the secretion of the neurotransmitter. Okay, I'm using the word secretion, but honestly, it doesn't secrete. Okay, what happens is the neurotransmitter kicks in and it goes back to its original place. I'm using the secretion for people to understand. Now, if the reality is lesser than what you had predicted, for example, you give only 1,000 rupee check, but wherein the employer was expecting a 10,000 rupee check, then the dopamine secretion will be very, very low. Now, that's why we are kind of suggesting Do not formalize many of your reward mechanisms like spot award or incentives or any kind of other variable pay. Always have a kind of a sense of surprise to your employees, because it really keeps them and it really forms a memory in your brain. And whenever an employee goes through a negative cycle, their brain would automatically recall a positive story that your employer had given. And at that point of time, these surprises would help them to orient to their job.
Brilliant, brilliant. So you did speak about the brain breakthroughs, the brain science breakthroughs, and I've been also reading a lot about it and how it's being applied to modern day talent management and top talent development. I know that you consult with various companies, you're working with leading organizations. I just want you to share with our listeners any innovative approaches or case studies or use cases that you have come across that utilizes cognitive brain science to improve candidate engagement, improve employee engagement as such. Any live examples that you have recently implemented, come across, will be useful for our listeners.
That's a very, very valid question. I'm smiling because when we started Peopleverse in 2022, and when I was going around India to talk about cognitive brain science, many didn't believe that this would even kind of inch their grass in terms of the impact. But we were lucky, I would put it that way, where many of the organizations whom we work today, they had a lot of foresight in terms of understanding how the traditional methods are failing now, especially after COVID. Okay. I'm sure you would have read research that says that genetically there is a change in all of us after COVID. And also, if you look at the workplace, what we were seeing as a common issue that kept recurring from the people with whom we work is the typical salary, the typical compensation mechanism is failing to cause the impact. And what was the primary reason was COVID had threatened at a genetic level across the world. When I say threatened, it means it left a trauma in many of the people because they had lost their loved ones. Many had lost their loved ones or near ones or friends. And you were under a constant period of threat that it might catch you at some point of time. So what it happened was your life became more closer to you than monetary rewards. In fact, we have data to tell that until 2023 end, employees still opted to have a good work-life balance. They wanted a flexible job that would give them more be at home. But now we are seeing a reverse in trend wherein employees are now looking at salary as a primary driver. That means world is coming out of that COVID impact. They're coming again to the rewards mechanism. Now, coming back to your question, one of a classic case that we dealt with was mid managers and executive level reporting to a CEO or a board, wherein any kind of motivation or any kind of mechanism to compensate or any kind of intervention to do was not reaching them. And they had a big vision before them. And they are in a very, very competitive industry. It's not only competitive in India, they have a global competition. So they wanted to look at that, so many hundreds of their mid to top leaders, and kind of tune them to the future of what the world is going to be. So typically what would happen is you would do a lot of soul searching sessions offsite, or you would talk about your high priority task, list it down, it's top down, and then you cascade. But our approach is very, very different because we start only from the break. We did a transformation program because why am I using this word transformation program, Satish? Is I'm sure many of the HR leaders would be listening to your podcast and including many CEOs. I have benefited from your podcast as well as a listener before. What I've seen is if you're going to just keep rolling out programs after programs, year after year or quarter after quarter, you're only kind of trying to whitewash, or you're trying to just kind of scale the wall in terms of the structure. But what our program really does is it gets beneath the hood and it kind of declogs them. It declogs them to an effect that we work on credible business outcomes. So what I'm trying to say is our customers have seen a jump from 20 to 25%. It's a significant jump in terms of productivity. And their dynamics, the conflicts, the team dynamics or the kind of developmental issues, the frictions that happen within a medium to a large organization have drastically come down. Number two. And number three important factor is our participants have reported a drastic improvement in their health. In fact, many of the participants have self-reported that they come out of their BP issues, thyroid issues. In fact, some of them have even come back to a good harmony when it comes to their personal life. Because in India, we have to understand that home and office are not two different entities. It is only one brain which is dealing with it. It could be a bad neighbor at your home, or it could be a bad boss at your office. But brain has the same sense and a mechanism to respond. Now, when it comes to our advisory vertical, what we have also done is we have helped our customers to pivot their innovation, because innovation quotient is the core DNA for you to kind of have in terms of your pipeline to succeed in the future. In fact, today we have associations with primary institutes that would kind of catapult our customers into a good set of innovation pipeline quotient. How we do it? We do it through core of our cognitive-based interventions. For example, we suppose it's an R&D team, we sit with them, we understand what are the threats that they perceive at their workplace, and slowly we try to mitigate them. When we say threats, it could be even as simple as a lighting, it could be as simple as a sound that keeps constantly coming, or it could be a timeline or the way in which the entire product or a project management happens within an organization. So we dwell on those aspects of how an organization functions, and we try to mitigate it slowly. And once you kind of remove the pain factors of the brain, naturally the reward system kicks in. Okay, so you need to either reduce this or increase this. But increasing the reward alone will not solve the problem, because your brain is going to continuously see threat. So you have to reduce the threat perception and increase the reward mechanism.
Good to know that you're also taking away business from doctors by helping people reduce their blood pressure and sugar and all of that. Interesting, very interesting.
In fact, some of our participants are also professors from premier institutes, and also some doctors have also attended our programs.
Wow. Very nice to know that. So let's quickly shift the spotlight to this very unique tool that you've been talking about, Srini, and we have had this conversation in the past. Now, one of the biggest challenges in my world, and all recruiters will agree with me, is predicting whether the candidate will walk through the door on the date of joining. And, all recruiters today look forward to the candidate's joining date much more than they look forward to their birth date or their marriage date. That's the scenario today. So, when you told me that there is a tool that can actually predict whether a candidate will join or not, it's obviously something that we are all very interested to know. How do you use cognitive brain science? How did you put together this tool? And can you share some examples of whether you've put that in practice? Have you started seeing early results? I'm sure a lot of our listeners from the recruiting fraternity will be very keen to understand.
Absolutely, Sati. I think this is one of the number one problem statements when it comes to talent acquisition in any organization. And we took this problem statement right at the start of our business, because we wanted to remedy this situation. How our behavior analytics works is it doesn't talk about the future, because when a candidate does not turn up on the promised date, what it means is they have set of experiences in their brain that does not either help them to select you, or certain better set of experiences that has helped him to select a competitor over you. Typically, what happens is you look at the success ratio, what worked and what didn't work rather. So we go by the model of a survival bias. Okay, survival bias is, for example, in an aeroplane, that if there is a flight that takes off from point A to point B, and out of 100 times it only succeeds to reach point B 60 times of its journey, during a year. Most of the times what you would find is people who do a root cause analysis of the failure. But where our behavior analytics takes a different route is we don't look at the survivor bias. We look, in fact, what has made a candidate join. What are the kind of set of experiences your organization has created for the candidate to come and join you? And the second important thing that we work, our behavior analytics target is not the future data. Our method is not to look at the future, because when you ask any questions related to future, what happens is your brain can create scenarios of things being very, very favorable to you. So instead, what we ask is we ask questions about their past behavior that has already happened. For example, we take, just to be more precise to your question, one of the key reasons for a candidate to turn up or not to turn up is location, okay, in India. And we always first focus on whether the candidate is attending an interview in his or her home location or far away from his or her home location. And that is a data input for us. And the another point is we constantly look for patterns in terms of their exhibited behaviors on how they have been selective in their decision making. Because it's not only the first interview, the screening interview that you have with the candidate. The brain keeps changing the decision at different points of the interview process. For example, in India, what we understood from a study is there is anywhere between 3 steps to 12 steps. And the average cost of spend per candidate is anywhere between 25,000 to 5 lakhs, depending on the level. So if they don't turn up, it's a huge loss for the organization. So today, we have a confidence rate of 96% in terms of a predictive probability. Okay, we have very successful customers. In fact, today our tool is kind of eaten from our hand. That's the kind of demand we are having today, because we are very successful and we have solved the biggest problem that is facing the industry. Number one. Number two is, when it comes to our product, what it also gives you is, it also gives you a probability of how their engagement will be after they join you. Okay. And we don't stop there. Suppose a candidate has got a very low confidence rate of joining you, our behavior analytics would give you smart insights to tell you how to move them to a higher confidence of joining you. And some of our customers have taken it to a very exponential distance, wherein they have integrated our input to their pre-onboarding and onboarding plan of a new employee, and it has worked wonders. They have the new employees have become anchored to the job, and also their engagement levels have drastically increased. So this is one of the success stories that I could give you when you kind of curate personally about each of the candidate, and your hiring team knows what to water, how much to water, for each of the candidate. They don't need to spend the same time and energy for everyone.
Thank you, Srini, for that. Now, before we conclude, I just want to ask you, especially for our listeners who are new to the cognitive brain science space and its positive impact on talent management, can you direct them to some research papers, some research insights, or how do they stay updated and current on what is happening in that space? If you can just, provide them some access to knowledge or repositories, that will help. Srini.
Sure. In fact, I always admire the hiring team of any organization, because they always go through a lot of, it's more important than a sales or marketing team to me, because they have to go and sell the organization to an aspiring employee. So I would definitely talk about things they have to read. But before that, I would like to give them some nuggets, Satish, if that could help them. Most of the hiring is led by matrices. And unfortunately, most of the matrices are lag indicators. You're trying to do a postmortem when it comes to see whether they're going to join you, or the speed of hiring, or the dates to fill a position. Now, one of the primary things that connects you, the umbilical cord between the candidate and the organization, is the job description. And this is where the hiring team has to focus, and even the hiring manager has to focus. And this is blissfully ignored in many of the organizations. They only talk about job description at the start of the interview, and it is conveniently forgotten. But you have to bring that back to steam in terms of the practices. Why we are talking about it is, the candidate will only be centered when you kind of refer the job description, and also talk about their career aspiration. In fact, we would even suggest to the hiring team that soon after a candidate joins or 2 or 3 weeks before the candidate joins, please have a conversation with them about their job description and career aspiration. And as soon as they join, again repeat the conversation. And within 3 months, you should have had at least 3 conversations on their goal setting, job description, and their career aspiration. It is very, very important because the brain keeps altering the decision based on the experiences until it feels comfortable in the new workplace. So you need to ensure that you keep reducing the threat atmosphere for the candidate. Now, when it comes to interviewing, I would always suggest a CEO or an experienced HR person interviews. If it's a startup, I always recommend that the founder or CEO should interview every candidate until they hit 500. It's very, very important because most of the organizations today only paint a very perfect image about their culture. And that actually causes a lot of threat perception in the candidate. And most of the good candidates, because of fear, they don't show their real potential during the interview. So what we suggest is always talk about the vulnerability, the failures that your organizations have faced during the interview, because that would bring them to a level and they would have conversations that would show their potential to you. Now, coming to your question in terms of what they need to rate, what I find rather is the awareness on cognitive brain science is kind of far less than what is needed. And how an engineer knows about the missions, the HR team should also know about how people work. And we should slowly come out of the jargons. We should get into the simpler aspects of how human brain and body is connected. And it's very, very easy to crack the code. Now, I would not be recommending any books because I've stopped reading books. What I read these days are only research papers. For almost last 7 years, I've been reading only research papers. There are amazing research papers that come out every day across the world. One of the go-to destination for me is ResearchGate. ResearchGate is a beautiful website that would give you a lot of new outcomes in terms of papers, research papers. Because why I'm suggesting a research paper is a PhD or a postdoc or someone who is a researcher who's conducting a research is spending their entire life on that particular subject. It's not only a book. So they would have covered a lot of aspects of things. Of course, it could be technical. The pages are anywhere between 80 to 150 or even 200. But I would only suggest at least read one research paper in 6 months. Your life and your perspective will change drastically. I read at least 3 research papers a month.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Those are very, very useful tidbits that you provided. Thanks for that. I know we are out of time, but before we conclude, we usually run a rapid fire session. We may not have time to do 5 questions, but I will ask you. One is, in which area of talent management do you believe cognitive brain science has possibly the most potential for success?
Employee engagement.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, and you elaborated that during your conversation. Perfect. And one piece of advice that you will provide to HR professionals about leveraging cognitive brain science in talent management.
Absolutely. I'm going to advise. I'm not shying away from using that word advice because what I find if I'm going to compare India among other companies, especially the Western world, the North Americas and the Europe, definitely our centering on science and technology, especially. When I say technology, I'm not talking about systems or automation or ERP. I'm talking about, have you understood your employee well? Do you know their names well? Do you know what are the challenges your employees are facing? If the answer is yes to these 3 questions, then that means you are a good grounded HR guy or a girl. Now, why am I telling this? Today, you need to know your employee, not only the pulse, but the kind of issues your employees are facing, right from the operator, the mid to the senior levels. And most of the times, what is happening in the industry today, I know, unfortunately, is HR is not spending the quality time with the employees because of their own pressure. I'm not trying to kind of make anyone the villain here. What I'm trying to say is 60% of the time should be with employees, and the rest of it could be distributed across meetings and the other priorities.
Thank you. Thanks, Srini. With that, we come to the end of the episode. Thank you, Srinivas, once again for your insights. on the aspects of motivation, on the aspects of cognitive brain science to achieve employee success and better employee engagement. To all those who tuned in today, thank you very much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Join us next time for another episode as we continue to bring to you the latest and the best from the world of talent and HR. Find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Don't miss a single episode. Subscribe to Hireside Chats. And finally, don't forget to leave a review or share on your socials to help us reach as many ears as possible. Stay tuned for the next episode. And once again, Srini, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Sandesh. Early questions, and it was great to be here. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Lovely.
Thank you.